All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome today. I'm excited about the interview that we have to share with you. I've gotten to know Krista, who you're about to meet, over a few calls, and I really admire what's going on in the Kansas City ecosystem with a lot of exciting things. Krista Nelson is joining us. She is the Executive Director of PedsMrkt. PedsMrkt, and I'm going to let her tell that whole story, but it's a marketplace for innovators and early adopters in the area of pediatrics to be able to find each other so that they can work together, because we know that a lot of the ecosystems that we all try and build, what we're trying to do is really get people to be interacting and collaborating and to be able to show that they're doing that. And I think Krista's going to be able to give us a great story on how they're doing that and how that came to be and how she's finding success. Hopefully a little bit about her background, because one of the things I thought was fascinating is she is not originally from the pediatric medicine space. She's got actually quite the interesting background. But Krista, I want to just start with you so people know what I've just told them, but they don't know anything else. So tell me a little bit about PedsMrkt and how it came to be, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for having me and inviting me to talk with you today. I appreciate that. Yeah, so PedsMrkt is kind of the impetus of many years of being an innovation leader. And as you mentioned, I don't have a medical background, but I have been working at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City for almost 11 years. And so, started there back 2015 and really built an innovation center. And we take ideas really from our frontline staff and incubate them and develop them as a new product or service or solution to take to market, and really have built quite a pipeline over the years. And when we get to that point that many startups and many other academic institutions do of, hey, we've got a solution, we want to not just use it for our population, but we want to spread it across the nation or even across the globe. How do you, what's the market? How do you get it to market? And obviously I can go to conferences and I can do presentations, but that's a lot of time and effort and cost. And that's what we were facing. And so being an innovation center, we talked to a lot of our peers. Hospitals were part of the International Society of Pediatric Innovation, and talked to a lot of startups that are dealing with the fragmentation of the market, especially in pediatrics. It's a smaller market, and one hospital is not like the other hospital, and just how do you find the right people to talk to and all of that. So these challenges are there, and we saw an opportunity a few years ago to start developing this concept of a pediatric marketplace platform. And we wanted to build it to where it was cost effective and a great channel for, like you mentioned, those earlier stage or newer startups that are doing things really out of necessity because they want to make a difference for kids. And how do you get in front of the right audiences? And so we built out this platform and have a great network within pediatrics that we engage with and really bring the right audiences to have a sense of what are these new innovations that are out in the market. And so those that are members of PedsMrkt get to be a part of that. So that's kind of how it all started and a little bit about me.
Interesting. For I think everybody would help. Let's define a few things. So for the Peds marketplace, are you defining that just as the inpatient Peds marketplace for you, or is some of this stuff outpatient or clinic or in-home, direct to consumer or B2C?
It's definitely B2B. That's a good point. It is B2B. And so we are not direct to consumer, but we have every type of solution, anything from something that would go into a surgical center, all the way to a nursing critical thinking game. And so it's a broad spectrum. There's tools and devices that could be used inpatient, but definitely mental health digital solutions that could be outpatient or even primary care or family physicians. And so it's quite a wide variety. Our main goal is just that it is serving the pediatric market and that it is B2B. So, yeah.
So what kinds of products, and are they products and services or just products? What kinds of things would somebody find on the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a mixture of both. Some are just more on the service side where they're trying to raise awareness of how they can help innovative solutions get to that get to market. There are societies, like I mentioned, ISPI, the International Society of Pediatric Innovation, promoting that they're a body that's wanting to engage, with the innovation community, and they put on a conference every other year. But then we have products. We have very newer startups to the market. It could be a doctor that just kind of is doing this on the side and wants to bring her solution to market, all the way to a company that's very established and wants to really just focus in more on their pediatric solutions. And so if you want some specific examples, I can share that as well.
Well, I think that would be great. I think it would be helpful for people to wrap their head around this a little bit. And
Sure.
So yeah, what are a couple of specific examples? This is as of February 2026 when we're recording this. So if she doesn't mention yours, it's not because
Exactly. Sorry.
don't take it personally.
Well, I'll share one of ours just to start with, and then I'll share one of our startups too. So Children's Mercy, we had a nurse practitioner who works in our heart center, and she observed a nurse after a code where she said, I just did not understand the anatomy of the baby's heart. And from that point forward, this nurse was determined, and this is probably 10 years ago, determined to put a visual of the baby's heart anatomy at every baby's bedside. And started with just, a book that had a drawing of a heart, but there's hundreds of permeations. And so she then started putting that picture into paint, and she made what she lovingly called Frankenhearts, because they were just kind of pieced together, all the way to say, hey, if we can configure a car or a pizza or, something online, why can't we configure a heart? And that was the beginning about 5-6 years ago of creating what we call My Heart Art. It went from piecing parts of hearts together, kind of following that echocardiogram, to make it very personalized and specific to that baby's heart difference. And so over the years,
because so many of these are dealing with congenital issues.
Exactly.
So their anatomy is not everybody else's anatomy.
No, they're very unique, and they may have HLHS, but they may have one valve is turned the other way. And what we were able to do is allow very minute customization and movement of all the parts and pieces to make a heart that is very personalized, and it can be annotated specifically to that child and have it at the bedside. And it's definitely for the staff to understand, they'll put the different, oxygenation levels that are normal for that baby, specifically based on their heart condition. And that type of thing to really help. But it also helps the families. It's there for the families to understand what is specific about their baby's heart. But then it also shows, now after the next surgery, your heart will look like this. And then after that next surgery, your heart will look like that. And so we can kind of take them through that progression. And we've been using this My Heart Art at Children's Mercy for at least 3 years, kind of in our heart center, and found it as such a differentiator that we just had to take it out to the broader market. And that's exactly what we use PedsMrkt for. And now we're in 11 hospitals across the nation. All the top hospitals are adopting My Heart Art. So that's just one example of how using PedsMrkt to raise awareness of that has really been the difference. So that's
Can you
one.
talk about,
Yeah.
I think that's a great example. Can you, before we go on to the next one, can you talk a little bit about so you have this nurse that identified this thing and gradually turned this into a product, and you come from an innovation background even before you were at Children's Mercy.
Right.
So are you helping them through the innovation center come up with, how do we productize this? How do we turn this into something that isn't just her passion project or his or her passion project? And then how do you know that succeeds between, I don't know how many pediatric cardiac units there are in the country, but I can't believe it's thousands.
No, it's probably closer to 100.
Right. So she's got, if she's in 11 hospitals, she's in, maybe 10% of the market.
Right.
How do you talk about what does success look like for this? Because this is a little bit different than success that you might think about for some of the metrics of how many web hits or how, ARR or whatever. How does somebody like that measure their success?
So, okay, I think you had kind of two questions there. So I'll go back to just what we do as an innovation center. And it is exactly that. So I have a software and product development background before coming to Children's Mercy, really running an innovation center in my prior life as well. And so, yes, we want the nurse practitioner or the doctor or the surgeon to keep being that, right? That is their expertise, and they don't have to learn how to code or to, learn the regulatory requirements if there are, and those types of things. And that's what we do. We're in that partnership with them. And then we have vendors that we bring in to help us. This was actually developed internally for this example, though. And so we work with our IS department and do the development and all the testing. And we have a human factors team that we again bring in to optimize, the UI UX. And so really going through that iterative validation of the solution itself.
And I'm guessing also figure out what is the go-to-market, like how do you charge for this, or like what are the economics of this thing?
Right.
As well.
So then you're looking at, so that's kind of the feasibility of us getting it done, but then the viability of it in the market is really the question you're asking. And yeah, so measurements in innovation are hard regardless, but when it comes to pediatrics, it's even more complex because you can try to put value on the ROI, and a lot of times the math doesn't work. But when you're looking at the ROM, the return on mission, and the impact that solution could have when a baby is coding, how do you put a value on that? And that's the challenge of maybe only 100 centers. And we looked at comparables and we looked at what was out there as far as, the books that are out there or other software solutions. And, we priced it what we feel is like a very reasonable, software adoption of $1,500 for an institution to license it a year. And that's kind of our introductory pricing. And we'll test that for a while and we'll see, and we're expanding the platform. Actually, we're building right now what we call My Liver Art. And so this will be used, we're just about 75% done with it, but it'll be used after transplant surgery, where the surgeon can very specifically say how they kind of put all the pieces back together after that transplant, so that sonographer can more easily go in and verify and validate, because that surgeon can't leave until that's done, that everything is good to go and hooked up and
right,
all.
Yeah, and we don't want them to, by the way.
And right now they're drawing pictures or they're, trying to, communicate it in some way. But if you can just show them a picture, it's going to just improve that. And that's a great tool for the families to see as well, that this is kind of how and what things look like. So yeah,
right.
We're
so like that return on mission, there's probably a lot of qualitative stuff in that, because how do you know what is part of that? So you have to kind of look at that as an aggregate and say, when we're using this tool,
right,
how much do we feel like outcomes are better, and not just outcomes from a population perspective, is like, are they more engaged? Are they more reassured? Are they all of those kinds of metrics that are closer to quality metrics than they are necessarily? I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, more about the return on the missions, the outcomes, the satisfaction, and it's also like ROX, so return on experience, right? So that staff has a better experience, the family is having a better experience, and they have confidence, because we have this beautiful version of it's an N of one, right? It's their baby's heart. And we've even had examples of them putting that diagram on on cookies as, the icing, or tattooing it on themselves. I mean, it's so meaningful to the family. So, but yeah.
Well, and I think that's really interesting. And the stakeholders, like it's, so it's to help the doc, it's to help the family, obviously it's all in benefit, in service of the patient, but also like the sonographer, like the person that or the nurse practitioner, like the people that need to understand, what does it mean when we have this condition? What should I be looking for? Or what, what is, so yeah, so it's, you wouldn't be able to that's not just an NPS score that you'd be able to do.
Right. Yeah, no, it's much broader. And all of those, like you said, maybe not as quantified measurements do come into play, because even if it's saving one life, I mean, there's always a value equation, but we do a lot of things and invest a lot because we know we're going to get better outcomes. And then it's almost, we feel like unethical to not share it, right? To share it out with other institutions. And we've had great adoption with My Heart Art in and of itself. So yeah.
Well, I do want to ask a little bit about how, who do you engage? Because you can't possibly engage everybody at every other institution. So how do you find the right way to get people to explore the marketplace and do that? But you said you had another product that you wanted to use as an example. So I want to hear it, because I love hearing about I love hearing about products.
Yeah, I think the one I'll bring up is it's a company called Small Tap, and there's a scenario where a baby needs to get a spinal tap, and so it's usually in an emergency department. At a highly skilled pediatric institution, they're doing them a little more regularly, but still, it's not an easy task, and it's not fun for the baby or the mom or anybody in the room, the nurse holding the
Sure.
baby or whatever, because they have to curve the back a certain way. But especially for those that don't do them very often, right? So what is a way to make that whole process easier? And so we have an innovator who was, one of those doctors standing there watching this scenario of a baby crying, the nurse is stressed, the mom is, panicked, and they're doing the procedure. And he's just like, it has to be better. And so he has invented a cradle where the baby kind of sits upright with kind of the head leaning forward at the right curved. And they literally give the baby a little pacifier with sugar. And sometimes the baby falls asleep during the procedure. I mean, it is like a night and day experience. The trauma level for everyone involved just went down 100%, so we love that product and we are so excited. It's been one of our early adopters of PedsMrkt, and they continue to tell us that, people say they saw it on PedsMrkt. And so that's just great to hear about how we've driven traffic to them.
And so this is somebody that is from outside Children's
Yes, this
Mercy,
is an
right?
outside startup. Yeah. Sorry, I should have
Yeah.
been clear on
And
that.
so how did they find you in order to or did you, so I think that gets really interesting because
Yeah.
lots of people think of marketplaces like eBay or something and like, I don't know, it just exists. And then people find each other. Like,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you get things on the marketplace
Mhm.
and how you get people in the pediatric
Yeah.
industry, if you would call it that. How
Yeah.
you
How
get
do we
them to
build
explore the
awareness?
marketplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we, again, being part of iSpy and just kind of being in this ecosystem, actually run every other month, I'll bring in over 20 hospitals innovation center, my peers, and we talk and we collaborate. Pediatrics is a very unique industry. It's the first I've ever been in that is not competitive. We are so collaborative because we all want, and those that are just that mission minded, they go to school longer to get paid less, right? So they're just mission minded, and we all want what's best, and so for the kids. And so again, one is just very collaborative. We share best practices. We want things to, and so we have a lot of associations where we all come together. And so we've been very purposeful to, I think early on, we launched with the Children's Hospital Association, which has, the majority of hospitals. We're, again, raised awareness at different conferences that we've gone to. We were written up in Becker's, and we just try to raise awareness of PedsMrkt as a platform in and of itself. And then we're very linked with the Pediatric Device Consortium. So there's 5 pediatric device consortiums that are funded by the FDA that are led by various hospitals throughout the country. And so we've engaged with them and they're aware of us, and they work with many startups that are wanting to get their products to market. And so we just have a lot of avenues towards finding those that are in the pediatric space, because we're kind of a small, community at the same time. We kind of have links or, around our network. And so really just getting the word out. And we have a lot of champions that have referred to us. They know us, and they know we're going to, do what we can to put their right message out there. And that's kind of one of the things we also work hard to help them position the right message, really understand who they're targeting and, who's their audience that they want to reach at the hospital, and really get that
Yeah.
message out there in a good way.
So you have an innovation center at Children's Mercy there in Kansas City, but you're kind of like this fractional innovation center for these other innovators in a way, like you're helping them a little bit. So it's really interesting how you're thinking about this. So I think it would be interesting to explore the stakeholders. Like why is this important for all these stakeholders? And for me, the stakeholders I'm hearing about are, you've got Children's Mercy, you've got other hospitals or other institutions, you've got the innovators themselves, you've got the patients and families that are using these innovations. And you've got Krista, who's also trying to run an innovation center. So like, talk a little bit about what success looks like for all of those stakeholders, because I think it's going to be fascinating to talk about what you can't just run and do all of, serve all of those masters at once. You've got to figure out how to, what do you do every day? How do you spend your days?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. And honestly, first and foremost, our goal is to get as many solutions into patient care at the bedside as we can, and raise awareness of them. Because I think one of the things we see is the stakeholders, like for instance, for a hospital, as a buyer, there are a lot of times our surgeons and others that are providing care are just making do because they've been using the same tools and things for decades, and they're not even aware that there are new
Right.
solutions out there.
How would I know?
Yeah.
Like the cradle for doing
The
the
small
small
tap.
tap.
How would you
Yeah.
know? Exactly. Yeah. And that's the perfect example. So we're trying to become this kind of one-stop shop. And I think for that hospital to have an easy ability to do that environmental scan and to say, these are the things that are new to the market. And so one of our key goals is to continue to grow and bring more and more of those types of solutions into the marketplace. But ultimately, it is for the patients and families to receive that next level of care. But for myself and for my team and for Children's Mercy, we're really trying to not only get our solutions to market, which is obviously an added benefit, but just trying to change the trajectory of accelerating innovation, because the industry has changed. Like more of the major manufacturers have reduced their R&D. And so they just don't want, like for hospitals like that have big research institutes and those types of things, they're really used to just getting to a patent and licensing out. But more and more, those things are just sitting on the shelves because industry wants, you to prove it out and to take it further down the pipeline and do all the clinical trials and validation. And that can take hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And so there's this interesting gap that's been kind of, I think, filled by those that are startups and the VC community that have come together to say, well, we're going to invest because, because those industry players are much more now interested in acquiring and bit more established, solution than I think in the past. And so, for PedsMrkt, the ideal scenario would be to create almost this IP engine where hospitals are, putting them on their websites or putting their patents on, different, kind of autumn type sites and those types of things. But, they just
Autumn, by the way, is Association of University Technology Managers.
Yeah, and they're out there, but I don't know if they're getting lost in the weeds because we've got a lot of things that have just been sitting on the shelf for years, right? That we know can bring value. And so that's where we're really wanting to bring all these players together. And that's something we're working towards. I mean, that's a goal, is really to figure out how do we create this engine of bringing intellectual property together so that it's a one-stop shop for the industry to come in and, or the startups to come in and kind of see maybe one of those isn't a company in and of itself, but if I put 2 or 3 of these things together, I might be able to have a business. And so that's just kind of the goal overall of how we can just change this trajectory of how we get solutions to market, especially in pediatric, because we do feel decades behind the adult market because the investment goes to the adult market.
Right.
So it's just an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, like when you and I talked before, we were laughing about the, niche markets in health, and people think that peds is a niche market, but yet we were all kids at one point. And we talked about same kind of thing that women's health faces the same thing, all kinds of, but actually we all had moms. So we kind of, this is,
yes,
these aren't these niche markets that you're making them out to be. But so what you're doing is, and earlier you talked about, so I think you said every other month you gather some people together. I don't know if you do that virtually or in person, but you're kind of evangelizing the idea that it is possible to adopt this innovation and have it be really coming from within the industry rather than waiting within the community of caregivers and everything, rather than waiting for some big multinational to eventually, get its way down to doing this. And then you have the actual website marketplace. And then you said that you like ISPI or the, ISPI, sorry, International Society for Pediatric Innovation. So you go to those conferences. So tell me a little bit about what is the cadence of activities that Krista does in order to gradually build this awareness that these solutions are out here and adoptable?
Yeah. So you mentioned I gather really my peers across, I think it's about 20 plus hospitals at this point that are also running innovation centers. So we all have similar goals and similar barriers we're facing, and we kind of just share best practices and then, I have a community space, which PedsMrkt also has a community feature where we post just information to share, and I get guest speakers come in, and we're really just trying to figure out how, again, we all see the need for innovation, but how do we optimize it and do it more efficiently and effectively? And then how do we share what we're doing? How do we say, hey, I've got this amazing solution. Let's not duplicate efforts, because there's not enough market to have duplication of effort. Let's either collaborate or have you all adopt or help us validate the solution so that all boats rise. And so we've been having those kinds of conversations, and it's been fabulous. So that's every other month. iSpy puts on a pediatric conference. We have a bigger conference called Peds 2040 that's been in place for over a decade, and that's an every other year. And then kind of interim years, we'll do a summit. This last year, we met in Atlanta with a pediatric innovation summit, and it was a little bit smaller of event, but it's still just your core people and the people you want to really engage with across the pediatric innovation space. So that's happening. And then I mentioned engaging with the PDCs, and so they have a lot of symposiums that highlight their new cohorts that have new innovations coming to market, and so we engage with them almost on a monthly basis. And and then there's other conferences, the AAP and PAS and different conferences where pediatrics is the main focus, which feels really good when you can go and you're all in the same headspace and really driving toward outcomes for kids.
So how do you know, with all of that outreach that you're doing, that's a lot, that's admirable, but how do you know that you're putting, do you see traffic to PedsMrkt? Do you see, how do you know that you're finding success, that you're not just oh, am I, at some point we all get to this where I'm am I pushing a boulder uphill? Am I, how do you track how you're doing to know how this is going? Because it can't just be how many people subscribe to Hard Art or whatever. It's got to be more than that, right?
Yeah. We find that if we can get to those more pediatric focused events, that's where we drive a lot more engagement. We've gone to health the last couple of years, and it's been fascinating because we have our PedsMrkt booth there, and we're kind of finding all those the others that are in the pediatric space, and they come to our booth and we kind of all just huddle together because it's 95%, adult focused. So, and trying to do the kind of, is that the right forum? And I think probably maybe next year we won't do that. We'll do, so we do find really focusing in on those pediatric specific conferences. We really come out of that with great relationships. And it's not always about, oh, you need to come on to PedsMrkt. It's, man, that's an amazing solution. I need to call my NICU leader, right, to see if we can adopt this here at Children's Mercy. Or, again, just they're interested in raising awareness if they're newer to the market. And so they are interested in PedsMrkt. And so we really kind of evaluate the number of, interested parties that we have. And then, we're very engaged in LinkedIn, where we'll see a lot of engagement when we do posts and when we have articles that, are published, and when we've been to conferences, and we'll see kind of spikes in our webpage traffic. We average over 5,000 unique, active users a month. And, it's a pretty niche, targeted audience that is very interested. And so we feel pretty good about that. And it spiked in January. We got up to 8,400. So it's interesting, how many are engaged and who does engage. We have another product out there for Children's Mercy called the Black Cloud Nursing Game I mentioned earlier. It's a critical thinking board game. And we have it out there. Click on it. You can use your credit card, and we've sold it to over 50 health systems. And it's not just pediatrics. It's also nursing schools, and bigger, massive health systems are finding it. We're reaching further than even we had even realized. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
That's pretty amazing. So over 5,000 unique visitors a month. So do you have a sense of what is there, who comes, not necessarily a heat map of everything, everywhere they go, but do you have a sense of how people browse a marketplace like this? Because it's got to be a combination of, there's a specific thing that they heard about was there that drove them there. And then there's other people that are like in a discovery mode kind of thing. But do you have a sense of the different kinds of people that come to your marketplace, or like the modes they're in?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of them are browsing just to kind of get a sense of what it is. A lot of our, the main homepage, landing page will get a lot of hits into like different collections, like around patient experience or around medical devices and tools. And we see that. We also see a lot of hits to our newsletter, which we have an amazing, I think we have over 550 accounts that are set up kind of within the platform, and they're all getting the newsletter, but we have an over 60% open rate, which is just unheard of with the,
That's
that
huge.
kind of,
Yeah.
so you have a very engaged audience, which is really great. When I think about our LinkedIn, because you can do more demographics on LinkedIn, it's about a little over 50%, health systems, hospitals, kind of that provider market is our market categories of their occupation, I guess is what it is, or industry, I guess is probably what it says.
Right.
And then there's an interesting number of manufacturers, like major manufacturers and investors. So it's a good mix. And then researchers and are probably some of the other percentages, but it's the right ecosystem that we want to bring together. I think people are, just kind of really peeking under the covers to see what we're doing, and are just, we post every time we get a new member, and we're on a really good cadence, and kind of people comment, yeah, you've gotten a lot of new members. And so there's energy, and there's, interest. And I think, the best thing about it, I think, for startups or those that are wanting to raise awareness of their solutions, is we have the right eyeballs. We have the right audiences engaging in our site.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and you were talking earlier about, like that a lot of these innovators, maybe they patent it or whatever, but it doesn't go anywhere right now. And
yeah.
And then, but manufacturers, they're looking for later stage things that they want to license only after it's been proven. And so that's, in other spaces, I don't know if in your space you would talk about TRL, technology readiness level, but, there's really a gap between like, what NASA would call TRL 3 and TRL 7, that you're filling that gap of helping those people, advance through that with the marketplace. So you're providing a service. This is a great conversation. What do you need going for, so like for what you need, if we were to put an ask out there to say, obviously we want, if people know people in the pediatric space that aren't yet aware of PedsMrkt, we want them to do that. But what are some asks that you have to help grow the impact that you're having?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to talk about the different, going from a 4 to a 7. I feel like I think we're all, as a kind of a healthcare or even specifically pediatric ecosystem, still working on that, right? I mean, I think we're trying to come up with creative ways to bridge that gap, right? And we're working on how can PedsMrkt as a kind of this platform bring these players together. So I think that's definitely a goal, and we really do want to do that. So my ask is, if you have expertise in that area, or if you have ideas on how we bridge that gap between industry or even the next entrepreneurs that, would be interested in more early stage technologies. I think all of our hospitals are very interested in how because we created these things for a very specific reason, right? We created them because there's a deep need. There's something that's not been solved for. We as a hospital put time, effort, and money into patenting and all the different levels of development to get it to that point, because ideally we're going to adopt it, right? And that's why, that's what you want. That's what every entrepreneur wants. So if we can bring these parties together, and it's a win-win, I think across that, I mean, that would be, the ideal. And we're looking for those that would want to collaborate in that kind of space. But then also, just if you know of that, mom and pop shop startup that's looking for a cost-effective way to raise awareness of their pediatric solution, or if it's we've had major manufacturers, come and talk to us that have a specific pediatric solution that they're just wanting to raise awareness of that. We haven't done any of those deals yet, but they're kind of like looking to see what PedsMrkt might be able to bring them as well, because they're wanting to sell more of their pediatric solutions that they have invested in. And it's everything in between, hospitals that have IP and so again, just we want to raise awareness of the opportunities and the offerings that we have. And we're all in it, again, to make it sustainable, but yet really the utmost is to get those solutions in the hands of those that need them to help kids. So
Right.
yeah.
Is there interest from the group purchasing organizations or the large distributors? Like, do they start seeing like, oh, if we need to have new product in our
Mhm.
portfolio and stuff, we have to figure out where that's coming from. We have to figure out how you vet the demand of it. Like, are any of
Yeah.
those expressing interest, or is this not yet?
Yeah.
Is this too specialized yet for those kinds of folks?
Well, actually, we had a great opportunity with Vizient, which is a GPO, who has a pediatric alliance. And a lot of our independent freestanding hospitals are a part of that. And I was able to go and present to them, I think it was a year ago, April, at their conference. And they were very open because they could almost see us as a competitor, right? But they really didn't. They were like, this is great. This is a great feeder they have a program that allows kind of those earlier stage innovators that want to become part of a GPO to submit. And so we've highlighted that with our members. And so I think there's opportunity for them to learn more about what that means and how that can work and really grow and show proof of growth as they're on PedsMrkt to then ultimately get to that GPO level. So yeah, they've been very collaborative. They actually then later brought us on as a webinar and they highlighted us in their newsletter. So yeah, it's been a great engagement with Vizient specifically.
Well, I'm going to just start wrapping us up here. Thank you for being so generous with your time and really just doing a phenomenal job of explaining how you build a marketplace that, I think so many of us think of marketplaces as like an Amazon or an eBay or whatever, and then we don't really think about marketplaces as also being marketplaces for innovation and how do we help disseminate it. So I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I want to thank you for that. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you're like, oh, Dan, you need to ask about this, or hey, here's what I want to say, or whatever? And I do want to like people can get a hold of you on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
or I found you that way, but how can people contact you or engage with you? And what didn't I mention that is an oversight on my?
No, that's great. No, you can definitely reach me on LinkedIn. Also just on the pedsmrkt.com. It's pedsmrkt.com. We have contact us and it will come to me. So, and my team. So yeah, we're happy to engage with anybody that's interested. And yeah, Neil, I think what you didn't ask, I don't know, maybe just the fact that, within pediatrics, I think there is just such an opportunity for, all of us in this ecosystem to really try to figure out how we come together. And that's why we built the community space. I talked about it a little bit, but there's just such an opportunity to, figure out, how do we come together and really collaborate and share best practices and not duplicate efforts. And that's kind of what we're really kind of working on across hospitals. But I think there's opportunities just in general, around what problems need to be solved and really just engaging with us as a pediatric community and ecosystem to really, again, get the right solutions built and developed and making sure that, as startups are really interested in validating their solutions and making sure that it's going to fit into clinical flow, that it's going to fit into the flow of the life of the family.
Yeah, not just in their institution or the institution they've observed, that it's going to fit into a larger clinical flow.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially for those startups, I mean, trying to just break into the pediatric ecosystem of hospitals to trial their solutions. And I mean, that's just can be a really hard challenge, but it's so important. It's so important to the success of their solution and the success of what they do. And so, within the community, we've had, startups go out and just say, hey, I'm trying to validate this and ask for feedback. And we collaborate quite a bit with ICANN, which is the international, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's the kids network where they are willing to just provide feedback. And some, and startups may not even know about that, but they'll volunteer, they'll give their thoughts and their feedback if it's something that's going to go direct to in their hands at some point. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of opportunity again to just come together and learn from each other and have these new opportunities to engage and again, just get solutions that are going to help kids. So
this has been wonderful. I've learned a lot. And in the work that I support a lot of people building ecosystem platforms to drive their own ecosystems. Mm-hmm. And I think that you've just given a great overview of how you go about that and what you're trying to do. And I love that you've talked about return on mission, return on experience, and community. Like those are the big things that a marketplace can deliver, not just transactions. And I think that's huge. So I'm going to be able to share this with a lot of people, and hopefully we see lots more continued success for you.
Well,
Thank you so much, Krista.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Have a great day.